Well, that's a day. I I'm realizing as I'm getting started here, like I uh, I not slept. Uh, Apparently that was a fair amount of caffeination that I got yesterday. I got about I think the equivalent of 6 1-ounce espressos uh, in uh, a drink and a half yesterday. So I got a lot of caffeine running through me, and I'm a caffeine lightweight. So I finished up last night and I sat down and I just plowing through doing some research online and just at it all day. And I just into it, learning things and figuring things out. And I look down and I'm like, I think my computer's broken. And I'm like, why is it that it can't be 3 p.m.? And it had been. I had been at it for over, oh my lord. Like what? Like, so yesterday, so Thursday at, what did we finish around 11 last night? So 11 p.m. to 3 p.m. today, I had no idea how much time I was just plugging away at doing what I was doing. I was having so much fun. I was so fascinated by all the things I was looking up and doing. But like when I really look at it right now, I'm like, I mean, I got some things done, but I've been awake for like 28 hours. I should feel like I got a lot done. That's a lot of time to not get anything to really show much for it. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little. I mean, I've got some things that I really got into over the last day and a half that I'm sort of excited by, but it doesn't look uh, as much like I achieved anything. It's just it's a lot of information and not as much productivity achieved. But I I have basically dissected several different games to figure out some of the best working mechanisms by which I can uh, achieve my goals for some of my projects. It's just that's so it's such dry informational content that I have achieved in the last 26 odd hours that it's hard to be enthusiastic about it, but I kind of am still enthusiastic about it. I'm also probably not as high speed chatty as I maybe was last night. Um, like I remember last night starting up the live stream and it was so weird. Like I just started chatting and chatting and chatting and going at it and talking about all the things that I was thinking about working on and doing. And I looked up and like 4 minutes had gone by and I felt like I'd been talking for 15 to 20. I'm like, oh, I'm in trouble. um, so yeah, I probably won't be quite as energetic as all that, but I like the amount of caffeine I got last night. I do have a mild amount of a headache. Part of that is also that a couple of things. One, today got really warm here. The temperature here today feels like it was at least in the lower 80s, which feels weird. We haven't hit that high lately. We've still been hitting night times below 60. And so, like a couple days ago, uh, the the heater blew. It didn't blow. It just shut itself off, and I had to restart it. And because I woke up and it was cold. And now, like, I didn't go to sleep last night. I've just been plugging away at doing research and stuff here today, and um, I just feel like I'm chronically sweating. I don't know if some of that might be caffeine, because I'm a caffeine lightweight. I am undeniably a caffeine lightweight. A quarter of a dark chocolate candy bar would have me wired for sound. I'd just be gone. And so when I had something equivalent to 5 or 6 espressos yesterday in an hour, whoo, I didn't know what I was setting myself up for. Goodness gracious. How do people do that on a regular basis? Like, I know people who drink like 6 of those in a day. That's gotta mess you up. That's gotta wreck you. But uh, I like. There's a part of me like feeling like, is it something I would revisit? Because I did a lot of research and uh, systematic analysis and breakdown of all the things that I was working on last night, and I like I can't I can't imagine if I could if I could harness that. I could do some amazing things. I could really do, but I don't want to get into the habit of doing that because there is a price to pay for that. I am probably going to feel more of this over the next 24 hours. But like I have noticed that partly due to the heat and partly due to the just sitting for so long working at things, or in my case, slouching um, at a keyboard, like not slouching frontwards, I slouch backwards. So it's not as bad for my back. I'm supported. But it's still super, super sedentary for the last 26 hours. And um, I got up to get something to eat. And that's the other thing I didn't do is I was like, when I say I finished here last night, I went and made something to eat, finished eating around midnight, came back in here and just plowed away working on things and looking at things, and didn't notice until 3 p.m. that I was already most of the way through a day. When I say that, I mean like I literally, it was 6 p.m. before I said, "Oh, I haven't eaten since probably around midnight last night. I should really resolve that." And so, like, I know that can rough me up a little bit. And the other thing that can happen when that happens is um, my blood pressure drops. And I already have moderately low blood pressure as it is. And so, if my blood pressure goes down, it sort of leaves me in I get lightheaded if I stand too fast. And uh, my blood can sort of pool in my limbs. So like when I was standing in the kitchen making something to eat, my feet got very big, very red, and very hot. Like hot to the touch. And so like that suggests to me that my circulation got real sluggish when I wasn't moving much at all for hours on end, which is not a good thing. But the other thing I've noticed today is, and this is probably maybe a little too much information, but caffeine is a diuretic. And I consumed hundreds of times more caffeine than I would normally consume in a day in an hour last night. And so I have been flushing water all day. So I think I was also partly a little dehydrated too. So which is probably part of what led to some of that. But um, yeah, so we've now rambled for 10 minutes about the wonders of caffeine. I will try to be much more careful about that in the future. But anyway, let's get into talking about one of the things that I did figure out last night. I was wrong. Looking at the Game Crafters website, I don't know how I missed it, but I followed a link through, and I don't know if I can do this building the game and selling it through their website, or if I will have to do this, buy the games, store them myself, and mail them when people purchase it from me, kind of thing. But I could make this game the way I originally envisioned it, because if I were to get the custom laser etched dice, yeah, they're like $5 or $6 a piece minimum. But over in one other little corner of their site, they have these dice with, they're made to put stickers on them. And one of those dice is 41 cents. I could get a set of 10 of those dice easily for $4.10. Now, the stickers, you can get 15 stickers for about $2.40 some odd cents. So for about $7 to $8, I could get the dice I need for the game design that I'm thinking of. And if I do a really simple streamlined version of it, like a beta test, play test version of it, where I get the images for the dice right, and I get the board right, I get a deck of cards right, I think we're looking at a possible price range of under $20. And that's very doable. And I'm not feeling like I'll be settling, because when I first envisioned this, the mechanism of the games, there are a couple games that I'm sort of cannibalizing to get the parts for how this game would work that I'm making. And the mechanisms for this game are based off of a card mechanism that they use in what was it called? It was 5-Minute Dungeon. They also do an abbreviated, streamlined version of the same mechanism for a Marvel. It's 5-Minute Marvel, and it's like 20. That game's like 20 some odd bucks out at. I think you can get it on Amazon. And the 5-Minute Dungeon is like $12 to $15, which is a decent price. And they look like an absolute blast for a few game nights. I think it's a mechanism that in that format has a limited lifespan. After a while, it sort of becomes like you get together with 5 or 4 friends, and you're essentially playing the equivalent of group solitaire. Like its repeatability. I mean, once you've achieved the goal, it just doesn't hold the same fascination, it sounds like, for some people. But the mechanism by which they handle those parts are only a part of what I'm doing for the larger game. So where 5-Minute Marvel and 5-Minute Dungeon do their best work is, this isn't a story game. 5-Minute Dungeon isn't a story game. It isn't a role-playing game. It isn't a action or puzzle solving game. It's literally you're there, you picked a character, you have a deck of cards, and you go into a place and you're it's almost like playing Yahtzee is the way I look at it. But instead of rolling dice to match the numbers on your dice to the sets that you're supposed to make, you're you're pulling out sets of cards. So you draw to have 3 to 6 cards in your hand, and everybody else draws to have the same number of cards in their hand. You go into a dungeon, you confront a monster in the dungeon, and the monster has 2 to 6 symbols on its front, and those symbols are the same symbols you have on the front of your cards. So basically, what you're doing is you're trying to match the symbols on your card to the symbols on the monster, and when all of you have gotten the right symbols together, you've defeated the monster. You flip over the next card and you just go, 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 and you try to get all the way through. There are a couple feature cards that go through, like events that are like another pit trap, and so everybody discards cards from their hands, and you start going at it next round out and keep going and going and going, and your goal is you're running on a timer. You've got 5 minutes to get through a stack of 20 cards for the first one. And when you finish that stack of 20 cards, then the placard that they're on is the monster you have to defeat. And that monster has lots of symbols on it. And so it's a multi round, just go, 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 go. But it's not done in rounds. That's the thing is like you put down cards, you draw cards, you put down cards, you draw cards, and everybody else around you is doing the exact same thing at the same time, and you're trying to communicate with one another, saying like, okay, well, this we need 2 more arrows, a shield, and a spell in order to beat this monster. And so you're like, I've got this, I've got this. So it's like Go Fish, Yahtzee, and Solitaire as a group. And so it is a fun and interesting mechanism for doing that part of it. But once you beat the monster, you're like, okay, I'm done. We've beat this level. Then there's a next level up boss that you're supposed to fight. And his stack, I believe, is 25 cards deep. And the event cards, the pit traps, and other events like that, those are 2 for every player that you have playing. And each of your characters that you play, like you could play the wizard or the thief or whatever, they have a special bonus where you can, like, usually it's discard 3 of your cards to do something. So you could discard 3 cards that are like, say you're facing a monster that's 2 jumping, 1 spell, and a shield, but all you've got is arrows and swords. You don't have what you need to beat that monster, but you have the power to discard your 2 swords and an arrow, or 2 arrows and a sword. Discard those cards as discard your 3, and if the monster you're facing is a monster, a person, or an obstacle, different characters have the ability to. I'm not sure I'm making any sense with this, but different characters have the ability to remove that monster from play and get to the next card in the deck. So, like, it has some of these little like gimmicks to get you through the stack faster, and it has gimmicks that can get you tripped up and slowed down. And so it's like it's a neat little thing for what it is, but it really is just get through the deck in 5 minutes kind of gameplay. Whereas the game I'm working on is a game that has story, setting, and events that are like interesting as almost a role play with other players. And So it's an adventure game, but the thing I needed to figure out was, in this adventure game, is there a way to do action adventure sequences like raiding the palace of Ming the Merciless, in a way that's not roll dice, see how lucky you are, or here's one of 4 big bulky decks full of cards that you have to ration out and calculate like some elaborate game cross between chess and Uno, and figure out like, okay, how do I juggle this to pull this off and achieve this. And looking at this 5-minute dungeon approach to this, I like the mechanism of the gameplay for that. But like I said, it is very similar to Yahtzee, and so there's a part of my brain that goes like, so why don't I use dice to do it? Instead of doing pairs of sixes, or 2 threes and 2 fours. If 4 is ray guns and 5 is uh, uh, fisticuffs, then it adds to the theme. So, like in a situation where you're confronting a monster and you need 2, like a minion of Ming the Merciless confronts you, and you need 2 fisticuffs, a ray gun, and I can't even remember what the other ones are right now. But you need those 4 things to get through him. Roll your dice, and you roll your dice, and you pick out the ones that match what you need it to match. You roll again, match any more that you get, and then roll one more time. I think that's the way I kind of want to do it, and see if you can beat. Like, I have to do a little bit more. It's been a long time since I played Yahtzee, but I'll do a little looking into how the sequence of rolls go for Yahtzee. But if I make a set of dice, and that's the thing is, the categories of cards in 5-minute dungeon are swords, shields, spells, arrows, and jumping. So there are 5 of them. There are 5 dice in Yahtzee. And if you look at a die, any die will have 6 faces on it. So if I make a die where I do one of each of those categories on a die, have one blank face on, say, 4 of them, and then the other 4 have faces that have both a run and a sword, or a jump and a sword, a spell and a sword kind of thing. So do doubles on a side. You'd have a whole set of dice that could let you do the same thing you could do with cards in a different way. And so that's sort of what I'm looking to do. And now that I, did the research last night, and I crunched through a bunch of stuff, learning what materials I can order to get this done. Now, I'm not sure if I'll have to package them myself, because I have to sign up and renew my account or something to get the estimates and see if I can get it put in the box. So if I set it up and set it up in the store that somebody could purchase this game, would they be able to put my non-custom dice in the box for that sale? They should be able to, I think. But the other thing is, like, the area I ended up in Game Crafters last night was an area where I can order board blanks, and they have a couple of blank hexagonal boards that I can get that would, I think, be a decent size for doing the Cyberpunk game. And those boards are like $1.20. And then I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do for the strip that the main part of the Cyberpunk game goes down, but I think I could probably get, uh I could at least get the boards, to do a decent quality prototype in person. Like, I've got the digital concepts all worked out at this point, but I kinda like to handcraft things sometimes, and so I want a handmade version of it where I have a little more control over the look and style of it. So I wanna kind of get back to, see if I could order some of those pieces that I could use to assemble. Like, it's not gonna be perfect because I chose weird shapes for my game, the Cyberpunk game, but this game, the game that I'm working on now, I don't see any reason why I can't do my tabletop, uh, dice-based, retro future ray gun gothic adventure game. And my card game also could they could all be done potentially through, game crafters. So I'm hopeful with that. I'm not gonna get them done by the end of this week, but maybe something like maybe the card game by the end of the month, and I can't guarantee that, but I would hope that one of these 2 games, I will at least have a play testable version up, and then yeah, I mean, let's see if I can pull up some of the files of what I was working on last night. It is a bit of a mess of notes right now. It is a jumbled mess, but so we've got the. I also stopped for a little bit to. There's a site that lets you do like uh, weathered fake science fiction magazine covers using the styles and the art styles and some posed 3D model characters and artwork from an artist online. He gives you some templates that you can assemble together in interesting ways. And so I played with that for a little bit and I made like a fake cover for it. And it was, oh, what was it? I'll see if I can find it on the internet here. I did a fake cover for the adventures of where was it? Come on, work with me here. So it's they have a few options and it's a little restricting because they're all templates of this artist. But they're fun enough that I might see if I can contact the artist. Okay, the it's called the Pulp O Miser cover maker. So let's see if I can. It's it's actually see if I can get that. Nope, nope, that's not what we were doing. Go back. All right, so this is going to be a mess here, but so can you see that? So it's Tales of the Rocket Patrol, Captain Rita Raygun's thrilling interplanetary adventures, created with the Pulpomizer cover maker. So I had a little bit of fun playing with that. It was sort of like a break I took last night when I was just plowing through a bunch of weird projects all in one go. And I got to thinking, like, after I did that, I posted that to Facebook, and I'm like, well, that was kind of fun. And I kind of like some of the aspects of it. It's not quite what I want it to be, but given that it was all done with templates, that's pretty good. And I got to thinking, like, maybe maybe I can contact the artist and see if he wants to do some of the art for the like a finalized version of my games, because that would be amazing. Like, if you did covers like that for every one of the cards in my card game, that would, like, we could do it with, I think, like 75 cards, 75 pieces of artwork like that. And then for the board game, something similar to that, I could do a solar system map for the board to travel across. If we did 5-player mats with characters and rocket ships like those covers, that would be a good start. And then maybe a deck of cards, and I'll figure out something to do with the art for the dice. And again, it would be like maybe a deck of 50 to 75 cards. I mean, I might do a couple different decks of smaller amounts for some of the stuff, but overall, like, the amount of art isn't too much. It, it's a fun idea. I can't guarantee that it's necessarily going to work out, because, and they have every right to. As an artist, I appreciate it, but getting commission artwork for things is not usually cheap, and they have every right to make a living doing what they do. Like, I just don't know that I have $250 to $500 to pay an artist to commission 50 pieces of artwork, let alone potentially 150. But I could build a simple version first and see if I can at least contact him and ask him what his price ranges might be, and if there's a potential for working out something at some point. Because getting that kind of art style for this game, that would be a good step in the right direction. I would seriously like to do not just like the 3D modeled ones, but actually have like a pinup artist style painted quality images. Even if it's like digitally painted, I'm okay with that. So like, but that's sort of like start with getting a functional game that's interesting, and we can always upgrade the artwork later. But so I got kind of excited about that last night, and then I started trying to figure out, like, how many pieces do I need, figuring out the right balance of parts and pieces for, like, what would I have to order from game crafters to make each of these things work. And I should be able to get away with like a tarot deck style of playing cards. So that's a 75 to 78 deck of cards, 8-card deck. So it's a 78 card deck. And I think we could get away with that for 3 to 5 players. The biggest trick I'm having to deal with that one is figuring out the storytelling aspect of it, and how many cards the players hold and how many cards they have to keep their hands up to. So like in a game like that where you start out with, say, like 3 cards, and you build up a hand that enables you to do more and better next round out. Like if everybody's hoarding cards, like if you have 5 players and each of them has 9 to 12 cards, you've already chewed your deck up. There's not a lot of wiggle room to do anything else with. So it may have to end up being like a double decker. It may have to be, 140 something, 160 cards or something like that. Whatever number game crafters batches them as may be the way I have to end up going with that. And based off of my last experience making a card game with them, the Runcible Foods was done with a tarot deck. And that worked out relatively okay. It works great for 2 to 5 players. 5 players at the end of a game, you start to get to a point where the deck gets kind of thin. And you're just rehashing the same set of cards over and over again. Now, that game's designed to have expansion packs of like 20 cards introduced at regular intervals. So it's a pack of different foods added each time. And that expands the capability of Runcible Foods to end up being a game you can play with as many as 10 to 20 players. If you wanted to get a huge family gather together and play a big old silly game of Runcible Food, you could do it. Be a little tricky. You might have to shift over to doing 7-course meals for the win. But the caveat to that is Runcible Foods is a game in which you start with 3 cards in your hand. Now, you can bid with your cards, and if you bid 1 card, at the end of every round, you draw 2 no matter what you do. So if you bid 3 cards, all 3 of your cards, and then you draw 2, you only have 2 cards to work with next round. But if you bid 1 card and you draw 2, you're going to have 4 for the next round. And if you keep doing that, you can end up with a sizable hand of cards. But it's almost never in your interest to keep building a large deck of cards. It's just not really worth it at that point. But with this style game that we're working on here this week, it's sort of a different way of playing. You don't start out with a small deck of cards, a small hand of cards, and tentatively bid them out, get a few to raise your number, and try to use them to win tricks, I guess is the term for it. And like this game isn't that. There is a sort of a win tricks element to it, but it's more of a you need all the parts to be able to tell a story. The judge is going to provide you with 2 or 3 parts. You have to supply the rest of them, and you need to tell the best and most interesting story. So your best chance of doing that, because there's no cap on how many cards you can have. Like, how many cards do you need to tell? How many cards do you need to tell a good story? There's no upper limit on that. But with Runcible Foods, I mean, it just gets absurd at a certain level where you have peas, oyster sauce, baked potato, blue cheese, oranges, and green olives. Like, you could get away with green olives and oranges. You've achieved what you wanted. Building a huge hand doesn't make sense that way. But when you're building a longer narrative structure, there is a distinct advantage to having more cards in your hand. And so I have to figure out, like, what's the right number of cards to build the game out of, for one. And 2, how many players can that support? Because again, if you have people that are building 7 to 12 card hands, and You you spend those cards to tell a story, and that winning story gets removed as a trick from that game, you're removing large numbers of cards from the game at regular intervals in a game where people already are hoarding stacks of cards. So I got to figure out how to adjust for that. And as I'm talking right now, it's occurring to me that we don't have to win the entire hand of cards. If the judge lays out 2 or 3 cards and you have to tell a story with your cards, what you win is the judge's cards. What you bid gets discarded, and what your opponent's bid gets discarded, and they're shuffled back into the deck. So at that point, each hand, the most you're going to lose is 2 or 3 cards. 2 or 3 cards out of the deck. That eliminates some of that card loss and lets you re-find cards to reuse them later. And so there's a potential for less need to hoard cards if they're going to be recycled through again and again. So then the win scenario may be much like Runcible Foods in a sense, where you're collecting sets of 2 or 3 cards. And in Runcible Foods, it's, the short game is 3 people playing to the first person who can get a 3-course meal. So it's like whoever wins 3 rounds and gets 3 sets of cards wins. You can upgrade that later to do a set of, a 5-course meal or a 7-course meal. And you could do something similar with this one. It would be you might be able to get away with a 78 card deck. The judge lays out 3 cards, which in Runcible Foods it's usually 1. Maybe I'll put it to 2. And then you use those 2, sort of like a Texas Hold'em kind of situation, where the dealer puts down 2 cards, and those are the cards that everybody shares. And you use your hand to build the rest. So maybe I can put a cap, like on Texas Hold'em, like you have 5 cards. That's as high as you can go. Maybe 7. I have to do some play testing to figure out whether or not 7 is a viable way to do it. And then you bid, you tell your story, the judge picks their favorite, and your prize are the cards the judge laid down. You try to build a set of 3 or a set of 5. That's doable. You should be able to get at least a 3-player and a 4-player game out of that. With some modifications of the 2-player rules that I use for Runcible Foods, I might be able to squeeze out a 2-player version. So we could get 2, 3, and 4 players potentially. Runcible Foods can run to 5 players. I'll have to do some play testing to see if we can get it to go that far. But if we can, a single deck of 78 cards may be the starter pack for this game, because the idea I originally came up with was something that has the potential for expansion packs later. So more pulp stories or fiction additives that you could do again later. This game is still going to focus heavily on the Ray Gun Gothic retro futurist approach. So I may have to make sure all the additional packs for this game are in that theme, but also build it in such a way that if people wanted to, they could include the Rita Raygun Stories game with other pulp story games that are built on the same model in a different setting and style. So you could legitimately get a Indiana Jones meets the Rocketeer and Buck Rogers kind of story that you could stitch together in a really fantastic way. I would be curious to see if somebody could achieve that. But even if you can't, having two games that you can play separately, and if you're really adventurous, mix the decks together. That would be kind of fun to do. I think I think we're on the verge of cracking it all. Now it's really just I need to figure out if I can build my deck right. Can I build a 78 object deck? Characters, people, places, things, maybe events, um, and basically they're story prompts. That's what we're doing here. We're making a game with story prompts. So villains, MacGuffins, events, people, places, things, actions, and events. I may want to put a few actions in there, but probably not a lot, because half the adventure of telling a good story is, you get the characters, you get the objects in the game, and the story is the actions. So you make up the actions usually in a story. Every now and then, throwing in an action like uh, uh, take Snow White into the woods kind of thing is, you know, a needed motivational action for the story. But I think overall you're going to have, let's see, if we split up a 65 card deck, 65 card divided by people, places, things, events. So split it by maybe 4. So about 16 cards per suit. And then have the additional suit be the actions, the verbs, the action prompts. And what would that leave me at that point? 65. So I want it like a 78 card deck, I think is what they offer at Game Crafters. So if you do a 78 minus, say, 4 for the rules, and then 60. So we're about, at that point, that's more like 9 to 10 cards for actions. That seems about a decent balance. So now I got to populate each of those suits with the right story elements for pulp stories. And from that's pretty much the game at that point. I need to do the artwork for it, but other than that, the game's playable at that point. I mean, I might even cheap out and do some very streamlined modern Art Deco googie combinations of artwork for a frame in which is written in fonts the prompts, and I don't have to do much more art than that. I think that's probably the best way to go forward with this. It means the game doesn't get held up waiting on art. So that's pretty much solved that. I'm gonna spend some more time tonight. Like I know I've been awake for almost 30 hours at this point. But I might even be more than 30 hours at this point. But I'm not really tired. So I think that I still have some of that caffeine holding me up. But I'm going to use that time wisely, do a little research about the dice rolling. I still have to figure out the motion on the board for the player. I think we talked last night about how there was a game I played when I was younger where there's a base movement rate with modifiers that you can gain or use. So I have to figure some of that out. But, so like a Yahtzee mechanism roughly based off of the dungeon combat in 5-minute dungeon with a Eldritch Horrors narrative structure course and a potential cooperative or competitive mode, maybe even a potential betrayal mode. I like games where it's optional that you can work together, compete against each other, or seem to work together but betray them in the end. Like having all of those options in one game makes for a lot of different types of games you could play. I like that kind of stuff. I did come across a little bit of a catch on, like, I still want to make it set in the Rita Raygun's universe that I'm building here, I guess. But the trick to that is this is a game where you play a character and other people play other characters. And if it's based on the idea of Rita Rayguns, well, only one person can be Rita. So I don't want it to be that sort of like only one person is the main character and everybody else is fighting them or something. I don't want it to be that kind of game. But I'm not sure how to make it a Captain Rita Raygun's game without letting people play that character. Okay, I must have misplaced something here. Trying to find what I was looking for here. So we've got, like, I've been brainstorming different pulp titles for it. I mean, the only thing I can kind of think of is, like, when I was building the image for that image I showed you earlier, it's Tales of the Rocket Patrol, because you had to have a title at the top of every one of them, and you couldn't change that title. There were, I think, 12 different options, and none of them were what I wanted. But I had been considering doing something along the lines of, it's Captain Rita Raygun, but she's a captain of a ship with potentially other support vessels. So it's Captain Rita Raygun of the Rocket League. Well, I don't want to use Rocket League because that's a video game, isn't it? Dang, that's such a good name, too. Dang it. That is such a good name for it, though. I don't know how to do that otherwise, though. Like, it's so good, it's in the middle of my brain that it just says, like, no, I'm not moving. It's perfect for what we want it to be. Like, uh, Captain Rita Raygun's Rocket League. Everybody gets to play a prospective member of the Rocket League with their own rocket. That's not a bad way to do it. And your mission, should you choose to accept it, is given to you in a narrative card from Rita Raygun. I keep wanting to call her Rita Rocket. I'm jumbling things up now. Okay. Uh, yeah, so I got to figure out the movement mechanic that I think will work best for the game. Because I do think the best way to do that is atomic energy. So the power for your ship is the power you get to choose. You get to choose whether or not you use it for motion or attacks. So you can have ship-to-ship combat or protection from space hazards. And then yeah, so that might be the way to do it. But how do we handle rationing out the energy? I don't know. We're coming up on an hour here. I think I lost you. So I'm going to call it for here tonight. Go get something to eat, do a little more work, and figure out some things. I did remind me tomorrow, if you see this, remind me tomorrow to share some of the names and the titles and all of that jazz that I came up with yesterday. Because I got a little bit funny with some of this stuff. Like, down to the point of spending over an hour, over a couple hours, I would almost say, figuring out what to call the different resources that we use to purchase things and do things in this game. And I came up with a few other interesting themed naming aspects of this. So remind me about that tomorrow. We're at an hour now, pretty much. We got like 2 minutes and a minute and a half to an hour. So I'm calling it here for tonight. So good night. Thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate the company and take care of yourself. I think we lost you for a little minute there. Good night. All righty. So I should probably hit the end stream button. That would probably make it end faster.